Welcome back to your Bucks latest on FanArc. I'm Sam Shapiro. Stop what you're doing right now. Be sure to check out Underdog Fantasy if you haven't already. We got this QR code right up here. You can download the app today and use promo code BasketballFan to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. It's definitely made following a lot of the NBA action fun for many fans this year, including myself. So if you haven't checked out the action already, you can do so by tuning into our videos each and every week. You don't need to necessarily download the QR code every week because it should just help you get in the right direction with getting on the app and at least encourage you to make some picks. But thank you to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring today's video. Well, we've got a lot to dive into after Shams basically saying frustrations at an all-time high between Giannis Antetokounmpo and how he feels towards the Milwaukee Bucks organization and that situation going on right now on the Pat McAfee show yesterday. And it's even more seeming now that at least a divorce between the Bucks organization and Giannis Antetokounmpo could be more or could be quickly is really right around the corner and is shortly over the horizon rather than maybe something potentially in the distant future. I don't know if this is just the mainstream media's effort in trying to fuel this narrative or not, but definitely seems like Giannis not happy with how the team is playing right now, sitting at 18-25. And granted, in the games he's been out for Milwaukee this year, they've been 3-11. So they can't necessarily afford to, I believe, lose him. They can't afford to lose him right now. Do I think they can in the future? I'm not saying the franchise is doomed if they do, but it's definitely going to be rather hard to recover from that if they can't strike up some sort of trade asset, or a number of assets, whether it's draft assets or players or something in between of that nature. But it was interesting to hear Shams say this again on the Pat McAfee show. The frustration that Giannis Antetokounmpo has is at an all-time high. He's frustrated with the losing. He's frustrated with the situation. And I will say this, I've spoken to about a dozen sources on and off for weeks now, and the tension that's in the air within that organization, in that locker room, it's at an all-time high. And there is this somewhat of a splintering environment that we're seeing going on there. Because when a player of Giannis's caliber maybe have a wandering eye or maybe doesn't know what the future holds there, and having these intense conversations with the organization about what that looks like, there's going to be such high levels and degrees of uncertainty within that organization. I mean, I can't blame the Bucks organization for being anxious to see how this unfolds. Antetokounmpo, a two-time MVP, arguably still one of the best players in the NBA right now on that roster. And seeing that this relationship where Giannis has played his first 13 seasons in the league, all under that team, all of the success he's garnered in his NBA career in that jersey, in that organization, it would be really tough to see, the two parties part ways from one another. So do I want to see a divorce from Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Milwaukee Bucks? No, because I think that what they have is very special and unfortunately not very common amongst a lot of NBA players and respective franchises, especially the ones that they get drafted to. And I know we were probably thinking we were going to see something like that with Luka Doncic in Dallas. That was sorely mistaken by millions of not just fans, but I would say league executives and just everywhere around the food chain in the NBA. But yeah, frustration's clearly at an all-time high. I think the losing is really the biggest concern Giannis has with the team. He wants to be somewhere where he's going to win. So I don't blame him for necessarily wanting to leave. And I think that if Milwaukee is considering a serious trade, because obviously they're not going to trade Giannis unless Giannis officially declares that he wants out. Jake Fisher making reports on that as well, that Giannis is probably not going to be out of there unless he opens his mouth verbally and says so, which at this point he said the contrary, but his actions are speaking a little bit differently, I would say, at this point. Anyway, I think in terms of assets that you could get from another team where you're shipping the Greek Freak off to, great option. Well, okay, great option is a bit of an exaggeration, but if you're looking at this like the team's going to go into full-blown rebuild mode out of this, I think your best bet to maybe build a somewhat of a decent, solid base to try to rebuild the Milwaukee Bucks if you part ways with Giannis, is making a deal with the San Antonio Spurs, because they've got a lot of young guys, they've got a lot of draft assets, and while unfortunately it would be nice to see Victor Wembanyama in a Bucks jersey, I don't think there's any scenario, planet, time stone scenario where Doctor Strange rewinds it and you're seeing Giannis Antetokounmpo play with Victor Wembanyama, or you're seeing Victor Wembanyama go to Milwaukee rather in exchange for the Greek Freak. It's just not going to happen. So, if you're Milwaukee, one deal that I saw that I think could potentially be worth considering, or some variation of this, you'd send Giannis to the Spurs in exchange for Stephon Castle, Jeremy Shohan, Devin Vassell, a 2025 first-round pick, a 2027 first-round pick, a 2029 first-round pick, and then a 2031 first-round pick. 4 first-round picks and 3 young guys on this Spurs team that could potentially be starter caliber type, well, more Stephon Castle and Devin Vassell, I would say, starter caliber type players, at least based on what we've seen from them so far. I don't think it's the worst idea in the world. Would the Spurs necessarily do that? I don't know. They're giving up a lot of their future to have Giannis Antetokounmpo team up with Victor Wembanyama in the West. And that team, personally, with that front court, I think could easily take down Oklahoma City. However, it comes at the price of giving up a big chunk of San Antonio's future just to have those two guys suit up with one another. And you're giving up a lot of the roster as well. I don't know if San Antonio would want to give up all those assets, which is kind of why I would play the devil's advocate and maybe why this trade would not work out. Be a little too much for San Antonio to cough up. But at the same time, you're getting one of the best players in the league, and you're getting them to team up with arguably the best center in the NBA right now. Well, maybe probably behind Nikola Jokic, but drop in the comments if you think that would be a solid base for Milwaukee to rebuild this Milwaukee Bucks team around if they decided to ship out Giannis Antetokounmpo before the All-Star, or before the trade deadline, But before we dive into some potential trades that not only could, maybe bolster the success of Milwaukee's roster going into the second half of this season, but maybe could at least slap a Band-Aid on the argument that this couple in the scenario of the Milwaukee Bucks organization and Giannis Antetokounmpo are having right now in hopes of maybe avoiding a divorce. Before we get into all that, I'm just going to dive into giving a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, that being Underdog Fantasy. Fast breaks, buzzer beaters, and block parties are back, and Underdog is the best place to get in on all the action. Now, playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like points, rebounds, steals, and more. Get your picks right, and you can win up to 5,000 times your cash. This week on Underdog, I'm looking at the New York Knicks taking on the Philadelphia 76ers today, and I'm selecting Jalen Brunson for lower than 27.5 points and Tyrese Maxey for higher than 29.5 points. Download the app today and use promo code BASKETBALLFAN to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Again, that's promo code BASKETBALLFAN, and it's all on Underdog. Make picks, win money.
Must be 18 plus. 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska. 19 plus in Colorado for some games. 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia. And present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/play and get terms DFSTML for details. Offer not valid in Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-878 or text from 467-369.
Feel like a lot of you guys in the comments are going to disagree with me on this one, but definitely thought it was an interesting idea to entertain, considering that I feel like the beginning of Milwaukee regressing from when they won the NBA championship all started when the Bucks really got rid of Jrue Holiday. My opinion, top 3 two-way point guard in the NBA, at least over the last 5 years, maybe not right now, but definitely still think he's in that conversation for one of the best two-way players in the league. And he was a big reason why I believe Milwaukee won a title, the Celtics won a title. I just think he is a very focal piece on a championship caliber team. With that being said, Milwaukee decided to patch up what was remaining from Holiday's departure with Damian Lillard. But although Lillard is a slightly more efficient player offensively, what he doesn't make up is the defensive capabilities that Holiday brought to the table. Lillard being a defensive liability a lot of the time, and then also not being able to stay healthy, created more problems for Milwaukee than it did solutions. Again, the hope of bringing in another superstar was to keep Giannis Antetokounmpo happy and to keep the team playing at a high level. But if anything, I think we saw Milwaukee regress and not play as well in a lot of these scenarios with Lillard. And then eventually him deciding to go back to Portland. So I think there is an interesting opportunity that Milwaukee could look into right now to potentially bring in another superstar in hopes of making Giannis happy, if bringing in Ja Morant in this scenario would help the team win more games. Now, there are a lot of questions surrounding if Ja Morant could be that superstar that could help Milwaukee win more games. In terms of the defensive aspect, you're definitely not bringing in a tenacious defender that's going to help in that regard. You're definitely bringing in an explosive offensive player at his best. But unfortunately, in the games that he has played this season, we haven't really seen that at all. Or at least in comparison to the highest level of play we've seen from him, I believe around 2021 when he was in Memphis. Definitely not showing signs of that player right now. So that, I would say, is the risk you are running in bringing Ja Morant over to Milwaukee to play alongside Giannis Antetokounmpo and Miles Turner. Right now, he's averaging just under 20 points per game in the regular season, but he's shooting the three ball not great, right around 20%, shooting from the floor roughly 40% from the field, but in terms of the shot creation and all of that, he ranks amongst some of the worst in the NBA. So, I mean, if the guy is not taking efficient shots and he's not putting your team in a promising place really to succeed, then I don't really, I wouldn't really buy into the argument why he's necessarily a good fit to maybe make Antetokounmpo happier. When you look at the shot quality in terms of advanced stats, he's in the 3rd percentile, with the 99th percentile being the highest, the first being the worst. So he's in the 3rd percentile in the league for shot quality, 3rd in self-created shot making, and 1st in shot making efficiency, which I think is the most important one. If you're not making your shots, you're not going to win the game. That's the whole game, putting the ball in the basket. So with this in mind, I don't necessarily think Milwaukee going after Morant to bring him onto the roster in hopes of making him happy would ultimately do so, because if you bring in Ja Morant and you start losing more games because clearly, the shooting and everything, or the shooting efficiency rather, and the other aspects of his game are not there, and the team continues to have this disconnect and the chemistry is lacking, as Giannis was saying earlier this week, then that's definitely not going to make him happier. It's probably going to make him more unhappy and want to, seek what a different shop might have to offer him. Drop in the comments if you guys think Ja Morant could potentially be that superstar savior that would not only help bolster Milwaukee's record at least to over 500, but could maybe salvage the relationship that is looking a bit brittle right now between the Milwaukee Bucks organization and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Personally, I think it's a very risky move, and I don't necessarily think the risk would pay off. I don't think a lot of you guys would disagree with me on that take, but definitely something interesting to entertain, seeing a superstar like him on the trading block and seeing really just the not huge market of teams that are interested in him. I mean, I get he's got a lot of extra attached to him as well on top of the not efficient play, but sometimes a change of scenery is all you need, and that was kind of why I wanted to at least touch base on that topic right here on the channel. Lastly, another move that I think that the Milwaukee Bucks could potentially entertain would be getting involved in a trade for Jeremy Grant to hopefully bolster the strength of the starting lineup if Antetokounmpo decides to stay. But this could maybe be something that Milwaukee could pull off before the trade deadline. I mean, granted, the mock trade I'm looking at right now is a 3-team trade involving Portland and the Sacramento Kings. The Kings getting Kyle Kuzma. The Bucks would get Jeremy Grant along with Malik Monk. And then Portland would get Bobby Portis, Cole Anthony, and Prince to go along with a 2026 second-round pick. So, I mean, yes, if you're Milwaukee, it's not great that you're giving up Bobby Portis and Cole Anthony, I would say. But ultimately, you're getting rid of Kyle Kuzma, who I feel like hasn't been as much of a great contributor that I feel like a lot of Bucks fans would want to see. And then adding Jeremy Grant to your starting five. I mean, at that point, you've got Grant, Antetokounmpo, and Turner in that front court. And I definitely think Grant is a bit of an upgrade from Kuzma. The question is it worth the expense of, I would say, Portis and Cole in that trade? I think Prince is kind of just there, as a little bit of filler personally. But you're also getting Malik Monk as a solid forward coming off your bench. So it's not like you're only getting Jeremy Grant. You're getting a starter and a solid rotational guy. Then you're also getting, the $42 million you owe Kyle Kuzma off your plate as well. So drop in the comments if you think trading for Jeremy Grant in that 3-team trade could potentially bolster Milwaukee's roster, because I don't think it's a bad idea, but I also don't know if giving up some of those assets deeper into Milwaukee's rotation would ultimately hurt them, or help them rather, more than it would hurt them. That's going to do it for today's episode of your Bucks Latest on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. We've got great daily content all right here you don't want to miss all throughout the week. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Sam Shapiro. Have a good one.